What's up everybody, it's me E-Man from E-Man's Movie Reviews, and today we're going to review Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Okay, let's do a quick intro. A fading actor and his stunt double try for another shot at success during the final years of Hollywood's golden age in 1969 Los Angeles. Okay, enough of that, let's get right into the good.
The good.
Now, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood delivered on many classic features that you can expect from a Tarantino film. First off, the movie delivers on some pretty humorous to almost comical moments. Most of it will come from either the banter between the characters, or you'll notice it in some pretty specific scenes. I think one of the funniest scenes that stands out the most would be the Bruce Lee scene. It was really enjoyable because most of the humor comes in an unexpected and over-the-top fashion. Now, besides the humor, you can count on this film to deliver on a couple of suspenseful scenes. You'll probably recognize this from the ranch scene. That sequence of events was an ever-building momentum of anxiety. The tension that followed it was incredibly thick the further it progressed. Then we of course get some really good old-fashioned, over-the-top, graphic violence in typical Tarantino fashion. As previously mentioned, both the humor and suspense are included in the extremely entertaining action sequence towards the end of the movie. In my opinion, that final climactic scene was easily the best highlight of the entire film. Moving on, this movie does a really good job of establishing a late 60s, early 70s type of setting. I was really impressed with how believable the film was, where everything seemed to have incredible attention to detail in terms of the scenery. When it came to the clothing, the set design, or even the soundtrack, all of that was done in a great way to really immerse you back into the respective time period. I think an added benefit came through with the cinematography that was done too. There were some specific and unique camera shots and angles that really highlighted the setting throughout the film. I think the benefit there is that the cinematography actually makes the background and setting more of almost like a character within itself. Another positive for this movie is the solid acting performances from some amazing actors. The film definitely boasts a number of well-known actors, even if they're in rather minor supporting roles. It goes without saying that Oscar award-winning actor Leonardo DiCarpio delivered a high-quality performance in his role. His performance was so captivating that you really do start to feel for him during his more dramatic and/or emotional scenes. Brad Pitt, of course, also delivered an exceptional performance, although I'd say his role was very much in his comfort zone. It's not very much to ask for Brad Pitt to play the charismatic and cool guy, but when he does it extremely well. I also thought that Margot Robbie delivered a solid performance despite the awkward amount of dialogue she was given to work with. Okay, enough of that, let's get into the bad.
The bad.
I think one of the biggest issues with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is that the storytelling seems a little bit chaotic. There are three primary stories being told, but sometimes those stories seem to take a long, extended journey that either loosely tie into the ending, or those turns were like a complete waste of time. We'll have some scenes in the movie that, in my opinion, really don't add much to the story and instead are just inserted there for fun. You'll have other instances where we're given a much longer than needed scene for what ends up being a very small payoff. Without going into spoilers, there's a point in the movie that appears to be only there just to show off the talent of the actor in the scene, but in terms of the story, that same scene could have been communicated in a much more condensed way. The other issue with the storytelling in this film is that it can get a little bit confusing as to who or what we should be focusing on. One minute you think the story is about Leo's character through Brad Pitt's character, then you may think that it's about the friendship between the two of them. Then you get the suspicion that this could actually be about Hollywood's golden age, and then we have Margot Robbie's character just thrown into the mix. By the end of the film, it felt like there wasn't a proper balance given to the story arcs to really flesh anything out. It just kind of came off as like when a friend is telling you a story, they get caught up with some random tangent in the story, and then they quickly remember to wrap it all up at the end. Okay, but going back to an earlier point, we have to talk about Margot Robbie playing Sharon Tate. I find it really hard to defend that her character was handled properly in this film. If the intention was to communicate or to even educate unfamiliar audiences about who Sharon Tate was, even if this was from Tarantino's perspective, then that endeavor failed. Due to her lack of significant dialogue in the movie, it was really hard to relate to her character or even get to know her. It was kind of awkward because a lot of times it just seemed like she was just there for like eye candy or just to be the pretty face on the screen. It was kind of hard to determine. I suppose the only two things I could possibly take away from her inclusion in this story is one, she's an interesting contrast to the character of Rick Dalton, or two, Tarantino just wanted to include her to satisfy his really weird foot fetish on film. Yes, there are a lot of scenes in this movie where there are just weird, awkward close-ups of feet, and it does get a little uncomfortable. Either way, despite Margot Robbie doing her role as best as she could, seeing as though Tate's character appeared to be a co-equal to both Pitt and DiCaprio's characters, I think Tarantino really missed the mark with her character. Lastly, while this might not be an issue for some people, I don't think that this movie has a wide enough appeal for others. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is described as a love letter to Hollywood in the 1960s. The movie does feel exactly like that love letter, except the only problem is that the movie is open to the public to read this very specific letter. So unless you're knowledgeable about the 1960s movies and TV references in the film, then a lot of connecting points will go right over your head. At least admittedly, that was the case for me. The film attempts to inform audiences about the culture of Hollywood in the late 60s, but instead it conflates it with the personal story of Rick Dalton's character. As a result, it made it difficult to differentiate between whether this movie was supposed to be about the nature of the times in that Hollywood business, or if it was just a result of Dalton's character simply running into bad luck. Nevertheless, because there were so many references that were unfamiliar, to me that is, it was hard to appreciate this film for what it was trying to do. So definitely take this criticism with a grain of salt, because it probably won't apply to everyone. Okay, enough of that, let's get to the reason.
The reason.
Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is a movie for the purest of movie buffs and the most hardcore Tarantino fans. I totally understand how this movie might get high praise from those who really are close to the movie industry. I believe this movie was made more so for that distinct audience. I also understand how the most dedicated of Tarantino fans can and probably might enjoy this movie because of the familiar beats that they've become familiar with and enjoy from his movies. Now, with full disclosure, I am actually a very big Tarantino fan. And with that said, I can't say that Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was one of his better works. So when it comes to the rating for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I've got to give it a 6 out of 10. Unless you fancy yourself to be a die-hard Tarantino fan, or let's just say a movie aficionado, I'd probably say that you should make this a matinee at best. This movie accomplishes some great things when it comes to the technical work and the acting, but the storytelling and the writing just didn't work for me. I also don't think it will work for casual audiences who might not be familiar with Tarantino's work either. So it's not necessarily the type of movie you could just walk in and just boom, start enjoying. The highlighted moments in this film that really bring home the entertainment quality are few and far between, so a higher than usual level of patience is going to be required when you watch this movie. So, have you seen Once Upon a Time in Hollywood? If and when you do, be sure to come on back to this video and let me know what you thought about it. Obviously, the movie wasn't my cup of tea, but it might be for you. So share your thoughts in the comments below. Anyway, thank you so much for taking the time to watch my video. You guys know I always appreciate it. If you're new to my channel, please don't forget to subscribe and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I've got more videos and reviews to do for you all, and until next time, I'll see you all later.